This is Moorish science. I woke up about 9:45, just another day in my life to make it. Even though my face can't really be shaved, yet I'm patient. Brush my teeth in the basin. Grew up, flew up to 6 foot Cinco. Through rooms I ducked, my head hit shingles. Felt like yesterday I had to climb and take a tinkle, but now I bow my head for the sprinkles that hit my head. So many changes that I live drunk and red, don't really make it. I'm really done with let some niggas shaking. I'm tired of looking through the eyes of the Satan. My denials, my lies find me trapped with temptation. Mirror, mirror on the wall, I fear I'm about to fall. Life ain't fair when I'm out the yard. In the dark I see fear, I see flares as I hear the roar. My fears keep straying from the law. Some things I'm praying for, better days. Celebrate with real family holidays, like all the days I slept. Gotta seize that, gotta ease back, gotta clean my mess. Back to reality, what do I see? My memory serves.
It's your man JB. Still good in the hood, my soldiers living every day to the fullest. Fear no man, just loading my bullets. It's like a jungle sometime, it make me wonder how I resist the urge to pull it. My trigger, my we don't play, but we gotta teach the youth the truth to live a better way. War equals death, ain't nobody wins. My homie took his last breath trying to repent his sins. So now we take things a little more serious. No cop or judge instilling fear in us. We the gods on earth. Since birth we learned to put God first. Stay blessed up. My get on the turf, stay vest up. The ongoing cycle of a young buck. The unit full of G's, no 50 cent. It's GCP, the streets know the best.
I sit back and recollect on past times when I was too young to handle, trying to avoid the guilty crimes. I used to just write lyrics and bubbling beefs was on my mind. It was all about having fun. As long as the sun would always shine, wasn't concerned with no money. All I wanted to do was rhyme, and I had those feelings to 93 from 89. And I hated school, though I thought it was necessary. Up naggers left, I was on the hot block daily, and I seen nothing lately happen in my face, and it hurts like a bitch. And those memories I can't erase. Try not to dwell on the past, cause times can't be replaced. And a prophet once said, don't marvel at the former days. It's not a wise inquiry, need to turn a new page, start a new chapter in this book called The Stage. We ain't afraid of the rapture, new world, new age. But mine, you get captured, the brain's already in a cage.
My memory serves as should. Summer sun has me feeling oh so good, so good. I've been raised in the hood. Na, 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 na. Summer sun has me, summer sun has me feeling oh so good, so good. I've been raised in the
Islam, and welcome. Welcome to Moorish Heritage and History School Circle of Readers at Morocco. And if you just hang on a minute while I adjust my speaker, we will begin. All right. I have successfully switched earpieces. Islam, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for this Moorish Heritage and History School Circle of Readers at Morocco. Let's see. This is your host, Anna L., along with my co-host, RVBey.
Islam, peace and love to all.
I don't know why I'm not. Wait a minute now. All right. Now I can hear. My Bluetooth connected and heard it on the phone, but I didn't hear it in my earpiece. So had to switch it manually. All right. So thank you for joining us, everyone. See. This is Circle of Readers, and the book that we have been reading for a few weeks now is Ancient and Modern Britons, Volume 1. Now, if you have a hard copy of it, you can follow along. We will be picking up on Chapter 9 in the book. That's page 150. If you don't have the book, you can go to the moorishnews.wordcom site, and at the bottom of today's syllabus, you will find a picture of the book, and underneath the picture is a link that will take you to where you can download the PDF of Ancient and Modern Britons, that book 1. All righty, so let me just explain how we normally do Circle of Readers. We read for about an hour, and usually we can knock out a chapter, usually a chapter. This chapter that's coming up is kind of short. So if it's not too much of a tongue twister, might be able to, whip through it. If it is a tongue twister, we would just read Chapter 9. But I'm hopeful that we can possibly get through 2 chapters. Now, what we normally do is we'll read for an hour, and then once an hour passes, we will discuss what was read. And we have been having some really amazing discussions, and as well as, just reading the Ancient and Modern Britons has brought forth, in my opinion, some interesting connections and bits of information that really identifies who is who and what is what. So, without further ado, we are going to pick up on Chapter 9, page 150 in the book. I'm not sure what page it is in the PDF, but it's Chapter 9. I try to always end at a chapter because then it's easier for everybody to find. The page numbers may be different, but the chapters are generally, they're easier to find. So, Chapter 9, everyone. Let's dig in. Ancient and Modern Britons, Book 1, Chapter 9. It has been seen that the top topography of our country and many other word witnesses in our speech all testify to the presence of a black race not yet blended with the white, and other evidences of history, of legend, and of custom have been adduced. But of the traditional memory of the Blackamoor, still visibly impressed upon the minds of our peasantry, very little has been said. The Black Moro, who from his forest den ravaged the neighboring country, and the Black Knight of Lancashire, who held the people in vassalage and used them with great severity, were 2 distinct specimens, but they can be matched with many others. The popular tales of the West Highlands are full of dark-skinned people whose deeds are unconscious of the fact that they, too, are anything but white. In the tale of Shifty Lad, there is the Gadichi Dub, or Anchelini, who is perhaps identical with the black robber, and Gotichi Dub, or the Barra fisherman's story. Two tawny women figure in the tale of the soldier, and the widow's son is variously described as a slender, dark lad, a black lad, and a black rough-skinned lad, while Ayan, the soldier's son, encounters a black fisherman who lives in an island cave. The Song of the Yellow Mulechij mentions the three sons of the dusky black king, Duini, and also introduces Tiardu, dusky black, prince of Lomham, and the group Kaj, who figures in the lay of the great fool, is of brown complexion. The king of Ayostfandi, who is a prominent figure in the story of Conal Boban, is a slender black man in one version, and in another, lean-boned, savage, and swarthy. The black warrior Mordu, that is black Moor, Moro, Moray, or Moor, has already been spoken of. And Miss Campbell further states, in remarking upon British traditions, that a great black giant with a club appears in many Gaelic and Breton tales. And in the same chapter, he also speaks of the Nayindub na Lude, or black girl of the clouds, as well as certain bald, swarthy youths. In addition to these, there is, in the tale translated, the sharp gray sheep, a bald black-skinned girl introduced, the hero of the Lays of Oscar, brown Oscar of the Alba, and a big black girl who figures in an anecdote suggested by the Song of the Smithy, complete my tale of West Highland specimens. That is to say, of specimens not regarded as historical. Of those that are historical, perhaps as good an example as any will be found in the person of Alan McRory, a black heathen, or the 15th century, a black heathen of century. We are told that Alan McRory, great-grandson of Ranald and chief of Clan Ranald, was one of the principal supporters of Angus, the young lord of the Isles, at the Battle of the Bloody Bay, and that he also followed Alexander of Lochpulk in his invasion of Ross and Cromarty in 1491, receiving a large share of the booty taken on the occasion. His portrait is preserved in a Gaelic song composed after his death and written down afterwards by the famous Dean of Lismore, in whose book, as translated by Dr. McLaughlin, the lines may be read. The poem or song is a hearty outburst of relief at his death and exultation over his probable fate. It begins thus. The one demon of the ghoul is dead, a tale 'tis well remembered. Fierce ravager of church and cross, the bald head, heavy, worthless bore. And he is apostrophized in another place in this fashion. McRory from the ocean far, bald head Allen, though so faithless, that thou hast not thine only crime ravaged I and relieved Oran. Thou art each thou's great curse. It is probable that he was called a boar from the shape of his headgear and armor, presumably fashioned after the manner of the Ceylon sculpture and the bronze V-shaped headpieces found occasionally in Scotland. This name is plainly given to him for some reason or another, because in another line he is again styled a boar, and the reason just surmised seems the likeliest. But in the second reference of this kind, he receives another epithet. He is the black-skinned boar. And it is stated that many were the devils in his train. Now, this term of devil was at one time quite commonly used to denote certain races of black men, as will be more distinctly pointed out hereafter, so that the black-skinned Allen and his band of swarthy devils were simply so many Dugal. The race to which Allen belonged was styled Rory, that is, the sons or kindred of Rory or Roderick. It is difficult to decide, when considering old surnames, the exact date at which this or that name has become meaningless. For, of course, all names were once given for a reason, although as we now employ them, they are only convenient signboards used without any reference to their etymology. But in this case, the son of Rory were well named. For Rory, Roridri, or Roderick may be rendered the tawny chief, being a compound of Rode, German Roth, Old Gaelic Rotten, English Red, and Rudy, and Rai, Rick, or Reed in Gypsy, Ria, the kinglet or chief. It might have been doubtful whether Rod is this in this instance signified tawny and not rosy or ruddy face, or perhaps red-haired. This might have been doubtful were it not for the fact that the poem just those men as black-skinned. The rod does sometimes signify tawny. We have already seen the authorities for this rendering being Dr. Armstrong and Mr. J.F. Campbell. Therefore, this etymology and the contemporaneous picture both agree in depiction those sons of Rory as the clan of the Tawny Chief, or perhaps more correctly, the clan of the chief of the Tawny people. Moreover, their genealogy also concurs with this deduction, for this pedigree shows that the clan Rory and the clan Dugal, or Dougal, black heathen, are descended from brothers. And the reason why one division of this tribe should be rude or tawny and the other dude or black may be guessed from the mixture of white and black that form the family tree, there being a Ronald the White in two different generations. In other words, the Gentiles of pure color and the black heathen, known in history as the Norsemen and the Danes, had in this dominated during the 15th century in the Broderie branch, is shown by the Dean of Lismore's book. Whether this dark blood came wholly from the Danes or partly from their kindred, the early Moors, may be questioned. There is more than one Broderie in the pedigree of an ancient race, supposed to be that of the old Moors or Earls of Moray towards the beginning of the 11th century. But Moor and Dane, ethnologically regarded, are very much alike. Thus, the legends and the history of the Scottish Highlands are both witnesses to the existence of purely black people. The Welsh traditions bear a similar testimony. The hero Pedur, son of Evrawd, discovers a company of bald, swarthy youth sitting at the hall door of a black giant playing at chess. This giant is styled the Black Oppressor. Seems to have been the same genial nature as the Black Knight of Ashton-under-Lyne. He very frankly informs Perdue that for this reason I am called the black oppressor, that there is not a single man around me whom I have not oppressed, and justice have I done unto none. And though it does not bear upon the present question, it is therefore satisfactory to repeat the conclusion of the dialogue between him and Perdue. Since thou hast indeed been an oppressor so long, said Perdue, I will cause that thou continue so no longer. So he slew him. While sitting in the tent of the Empress of Christinobe the Great, Perdue beheld a black man enter with a goblet full of wine in his hand, and shortly after there entered a black man of larger stature than the other, with a wild bear's claw in his hand, wrought into the form of a goblet and filled with wine. At another time, when he and other round table knights were in Arthur's Hall at Belion, they saw a black curly-handed maiden enter. A black curly-headed maiden, hideous. Blacker were her face and her two hands than the blackest iron, covered with pitch. They must have been very black, and her hue was not more frightening than her form. High cheeks had she, and a face lengthened downward, and a short nose with distended nostrils, and her teeth were long and yellow, and her back was in the shape of a crook, and her figure was very thin and spare, except her feet, which were of huge size. In short, she had the race marks of the nigritos and australoids of Professor Huxley, and in a more pronounced and hideous degree than many be seen in any living representation of these types. Kynon, the son of Clydno, encountered another of those black people, a black giant with an iron club, and such giants swarm throughout the Welsh tale. The Mabinogians, says Mr. Worthfight, are full of black men, usually giants, always terrible to encounter, and they are all extremely ugly, in which respect they resemble the misshapen and swarthy Huns, the foul-mouthed and ugly-backed Danes who went to Vineland in the 11th century, the ill-favored Moors and Saracens of heraldry, the hideous Egyptians who rode into Bologna in the year 1422, the deformed and shocking Samoyeds of last century, and the blubber-lipped Kudash whom Diarmaid killed. The black crisp-haired wench that came to Carleon upon Us was assuredly hideous, and the other giants are invariably ugly. Mr. Sidney Lanier, in his introduction to the boys Mabinogian, speaks of one of the Welsh worthies as having lips so large that he was accustomed to draw the lower down for an apron and to lift up the other for a hood. The description is, of course, a monstrous and ludicrous caricature drawn by others of a handsomer race, but it is plainly founded upon the remarkably coarse and flexible lips of the astroloid, and the equally exaggerated picture of the man whose eyebrows hung over his eyes to such a degree that they had to be propped up with force, again suggests the shaggy eyebrows of the same race. But all those grotesque and fanciful figures were once real men, though their deformities, horribly real at the best, are magnified and distorted to us who look at them through the dim mist of many centuries. The giant Swarnach, who was slain by Kai and the Arthurian knights, and whose castle and treasures they appropriated, was once an actual black Gentile living in one of the many black castles whose names still speak of their former lords. So the shaggy brown Yspathan Pencroft, who, like the so-called black serpent or serpent-crested black man slain by Perdure, is pictured as throwing poisoned arrows or darts at his enemies, is pretty clearly one of those hateful, horrid giants known to the Irish, although certain divisions of this primitive black race are now only known in Wales and elsewhere as quasi-supernatural beings, yet the blurred pictures that still remain to us are painted the proper color. In Welsh tradition, says Mr. Worthside, the bar batch is usually brown, and the cob linar are black or copper-colored in face as well as dress. And of the grotch, which word he translates hag, or witch, he states that she was the wife of the Abdur. Now, this word Abdur is the Welsh and phonetical spelling of what in the Scottish Highlands is Abachdu, and the English of Abachdu is the Black Dwarf. So that the name given to the male Garach is only another term for the Sib or Swarthidor dwarfs who are stated in the Lackdaela saga to have slain Frodi the Gallant, the grandsire of Oleg the White. And what is more, this term connects the Severlings with the Yenlings, Inlings, or marsh dwarfs. For although Abach is one of the Gaelic words for a dwarf, it radically means a waterman, being made up of the now obsolete Ab, water, and Ach, a termination, as in Utach, spearman, signifying a person. Therefore, Avachdu or Avakadu, when analyzed, is seen to be literally black water dwarf, and consequently the name generally given to the females of this race by the modern peasantry of Wales is quite appropriate. For the Graji, annual water hags or witches. Further, all these names remind one that the earliest forms of the words Moras, Moor, etc., and Cors, Cars, Pierre, etc., formerly touched upon, are closely associated with the sea and marshlands, as well as with the swarthy tribes they designate. The Welsh tales, it has been said, are full of black giants, again, whom the Arthurian warriors fought. An inference from this is that Arthur's followers were white, because the blackness of their foes would not have been particularized had they been of the same hue themselves. Now, the Arthur of history is said to have been himself of swarthy Silurian blood, but the Arthur of romance has never been wholly identified with him, and indeed, he is altogether difficult to localize in time and place. The legendary Knights of the Round Table may fairly be assumed to have been of the civilized crystal stock of provincial Britons, who, if prevented by the barbarian prisoner of the sculpture were in face and figures strikingly handsome, and their enemies, who are usually styled the heathen, are seen in the Welsh tradition to be black. That is, they were black heathen like the Danes or like the Moors. For the black people, as we know, and today the Danish branch of that stock by many centuries, how many no one can tell. Professor Huck, speaking on this subject, says that probably in the time of Caesar, and certainly in that of Tacitus, there existed in these islands two distinct types of population. The one of tall statues with fair skin, yellow hair, and blue eyes, and the other of short stature with dark skin, as dark as an Ethiopian, says Pliny, as dark as a Moor, says Claudian, dark hair and black eyes. We further learn that this relation, represented by the Siluri, bore considerable physical resemblance to the people of Aquitania and Iberia, while the fair population of parts of southeast Britain, the present counties of Kent and Hants, resembled the Belgi, who inhabited the northeast of France and the country now called Belgium. These Belgi, again, were closely kin in physical characteristics to the tall, fair people who dwelt on the east bank of the Rhine and were called Germani. These two distinct ethnological elements, continues Mr. Huxley, probably coexisted in these islands when the country was discovered by the Romans. And the subsequent invasions in which Britain has been subjected has not entered any new stock, but has merely affected one or other of the pre-existing elements. Accepting this conclusion, then, as in the main correct, we have before us undeniable evidence, historical and ethnological, of the immemorial presence of the black in this country. Other confirmatory statements have been made in the foregoing chapters, and additional evidence of a traditional kind has just been produced. In most of the examples cited of whatever nature, the two great types appear as enemies, which was their natural attitude, and a great number of the legendary instances preserve the memory of this mutual enmity. The black giants of the Welsh and other tales are hateful and horrid. The Welsh black oppressor and the Black Knight of Lancashire are fierce tyrants, the cruel foes of all white people. At a later date, when the whites were gaining the ascendancy and the blacks were cut up into straggling bands, or lurking like the Black Morrow of Galloway in solitary dens and forest shades, out of which they issued by night, intent on murder and rapine. Even at this stage of their history, the blacks were the dreaded enemies of the whites. Indeed, it is of this epoch that the popular imagination has more retained the impression. The days of the black oppression are so remote that their memory only lives in half-forgotten legends. Not so the time when the black castles were owned by another race, and their former masters were skulking among woods and caves. So vivid was the fear of them, and so lasting its impression, that children of the 19th century peering into dark recesses timorously or peasant girls seeing suddenly their own image reflected by the candle from the dark window pane shiver all over with apprehension at the vision of the dreaded black man, a mere imaginary bugbear to them, but a real terror to those from whom they inherited feeling. But this state of things could not last forever. No two races, however antagonistic, would inhabit the same territory for countless generations without amalgamating. Such as whether in an authorized fashion or not, a mixed race eventually comes into being. And this is what we see in our own history. Long ages ago, and in spite of a gradually dwindling party of irreconcilables, the two great sections may be seen uniting here and there. As early as the Norse and the Danish invasion, and earlier than that, this has happened at various points. Fian and Du did not always war against each other. Occasionally, they united in friendlier mood, and the result was Dong or Ru. At what date the first approach was made, it is impossible to say, though the earliest legendary record seems to be that of the story of Diarmid. There we see the fair white in the persons of Diarmid and Grainy, who, as the friend and the wife of the Theon, are presumably white also, amicably associated with their black contemporaries as represented by the Puthach, whose violent death was praised. Enough has been said, but of traditionary examples it may be convenient to say more. In those districts which were colonized by white races, such as the Dutch or Flemish and the Norman, at a period subsequent to the latest black invasions, it is likely that a blackamoor was to many people a being undreamed of because never seen. And when a straggling specimen of the swarthy races did by accident become visible to one of such a community, he would naturally be regarded as something uncanny. A case of this sort is presented to us in an old Welsh story repeated by Mr. Worth Sykes in his interesting collection, and it cannot be many centuries old. It is of a young woman who, while going one evening to milk the cow, saw, as she passed through a wood, a horrible black man standing by a hollow tree. She described him as very big in the middle, but says nothing of his features, which she was probably not near enough to see. To her great relief, he took his departure quickly, walked towards the spring where ghosts had been seen before, crossed the stile into the road, whistled loudly, and then disappeared. This Welsh girl must, of course, have belonged to a white community and may have been of the blood of either of the two races named above or of the earlier white British blood, that is Celtic. Another kindred instance is that of the experience of certain Scottish Covenanters not much more than 2 centuries ago. In one of his notes to the Heart of Midlothian, Scott tells of the encounter between the once celebrated prophet Alexander Padden and a devil in a lonely moorland cave. He also puts into the mouth of Deuce Davy Dean the recital of a terrible episode of similar nature, a real incident of Covenanting time. Tell with great awe how he himself had been present at a field meeting at Crotchmay, when the beauty of the day was interrupted by the apparition of a tall black man who, in the act of crossing a ford to join the congregation, lost ground and was carried down apparently by the force of the stream. All were instantly at work to assist him, but with little success. Then 10 or 12 stout men who had hold of the rope which they had cast into his aid, were rather in danger to be dragged into the stream and lose their own lives than likely to save that of the supposed perishing man. But famous John Templar of Carpenter, having told them it was no other than the great enemy who couldn't drown, so we let go the rope, said David, and he went down the water, screeching and billowing like a bull of Bashan, and he's God in Scripture. Now, this story does not show the entire non-Acquaintan, the Welsh girl's adventure does, for the black man of the covenanting story was at first regarded as a fellow man, and even as a possible participator in the worship of the conventicle. But he was enough of a rarity to make his would-be rescuers accept famous John Templar's nonsense as true, never reflecting that any supernatural being would hardly allow himself to be swept away by the current, calling out for help after they had left him to his fate. And since the story is said to be true, we may believe it as a fact that on a certain day in the middle of the 17th century, the corpse of an unfortunate Moor or gypsy went swirling down a lowland river to the sea, thanks to the wisdom of famous John Temple. Here, then, a black man was not regarded at first as extra-human, though perhaps not a very similar object to the natives of certain districts of Scotland 6 or 7 generations back. There must, however, be many memory time when two opposite types were losing their individuality by peaceful intercommunion. The simple existence of a particular class of mills known as black mills, already quoted, points to this, not to speak of many other black terms of like nature implying the same result. Of Highland and Welsh, and I fancy of Irish tales, in which there are numerous evidences that the blacks were not always enemies, there is no lack. And this cannot be wondered at, since it is in particular localities of Ireland, Scotland, and Wales that the black blood shows itself the most emphatically at the present day. But even in other neighborhoods, there are manifold tokens of this state. For example, among the floating literature that used to delight the rustic of a bygone day, those coarsely executed and often coarsely worded tracts are once hawked throughout the country and known as penny chap book, one sheet which sets forth to us the comical history of Simple John and his 12 misfortunes. With John and his misfortunes, we need have nothing to do, but his wife is deserving of some transitory notice. For her father is casually introduced as the Black Butcher on Tayat side, and the physical attributes of his daughter are quite in accordance with her lineage. Therefore, this Black Butcher of Tibaltadale may be taken as a representative of the peaceable, prosaic, workaday blackamoor, just as the wild and savage gypsy represents or did represent the fiercer qualities of the race. The epoch of Simple John is not revealed by anything in the narrative. We can only say that this particular black man lived before now, as the Gaelic phrase is, but he and his like must have been very numerous at one period, for had all their kindred shared their ferocious nature of the old-time gypsy, these being now the only survivors that their outnumbering white-skinned enemies had left, and the Melanotrio of today would only number a few thousand. But the traces of our black ancestry are visibly existent in 100 surnames. Some of these denote complexion, others do so but indirectly. The first class includes a great many. There are the clans Rory and Dougal, spelled Dubgale or Black Stranger in their own genealogy. There are all the variations of Dub, which is black, such as Duff, Dow, Macduff, and others. There are Dons, Carves, and Darks, with their equivalent Duns, Browns, Grays, and Blacks. All these are color names showing a black or tawny ancestor. So also is the name of Douglas or Douglas, literally black swarthy, and that of Moray, with its kindred forms of Moor, etc., but these only where the original name did not signify the Moravia, whether in Latin or in Gaelic. Such are the kind of names that directly point to a descent from the Moors. Of those that do so indirectly, nothing need be said here. But in saying this, it is not meant that such names nowadays necessarily indicate that the bearers of them had one or more fixed ancestors, because it is well known that the surname of the feudal superior was given in many cases to his vassal, though wholly unconnected by blood. Consequently, many of the unwilling followers of a black oppressor might transmit to their descendants a surname that denotes a complexion vastly different from their own. Nor is it to be supposed either that a real descendant of a black or a Macduff necessity be found in the ranks of the dark white. For a patronymic indicates nothing more than a descent from a certain individual, one ancestor out of Moor. They say that in the southern states, a man is counted a nigger if he has even so slight an infusion of Negro blood in his veins. Nothing but the most paltry prejudice could so define him. When a man is 9/10 white or 9/10 black, he is white or black before anything else. But if the Negro ancestor of such a 9/10 white man had lived amid a white population whose ideas with regard to nomenclature were as primitive as those of our ancestors 1,000 years ago, his offspring would eventually become known by some such name as black or Negro, used as a surname. Precisely the same thing has actually happened here. We know, as a historical fact that a Niger Veldu has lived and reigned over certain black divisions of our island, and probably over white divisions also, and that a race known as the Sons of the Black succeeded him in history. But just as our hypothetical Octoron family on the other side of the Atlantic might forever after continue to intermarry only with their white kindred, so might our British Octorons have done likewise, with the result, in either case, that the far-down posterity of the Negro or Moor would be so white that no ethnologist could detect the presence of any other blood. And yet, in both cases, the male descendants would bear the surname first given to their remote authors, a surname signifying the black man. The fact is that most of our surnames are so old, while they argue with considerable force that this or that name is descended from such and such a race, they give us no help in finding out the predominating blood. Every one, unless the child of cousins German, is possessed of 8 great-grandparents, but the patronymic only shows the descendant from one of them. The only 7 are wholly ignored, so that if one's pedigree is not complete enough to point out clearly and with authenticity a feature which, though the most important, is perhaps oftenest disregarded, every line of the descent back to the days when each surname had a meaning. The genealogy is only of particular value in any argument of this kind. Nevertheless, the names exist. And with those of topography and of usage already quoted, many a record in written and oral history, they emphatically tell us of a large section of our ancestry whose complexion was black. That was the most amazing and interesting chapter. I can't wait to discuss it, but what we're going to do now is we're going to evaluate if we're going to continue on with chapter 10. Let me just see. We got 30 minutes. I got through that in 45 minutes. I can maybe get through chapter 10 because it looks like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and a half pages. What do you think? Should I try it or should I leave it? I'm going to try it. Let's push on. This is chapter 10 in Modern Britons, and it starts on page 164. Unquestionably, the most recent black European races must be looked at under their guise of gypsies, and it is startling to reflect how recent they are. As actually black people, the tawniest gypsy now in Europe is probably but a half-blood, and most of them are something like quadroons. Mr. Simon says in his history, page 374, I may indeed venture to assert that there is not a full-blooded gypsy in Scotland, and most positively that in England, where the race is held to be so pure, all that can be said of some families is that they have not been crossed as far as is known, but that With these exceptions, the body is much mixed. In all the other references to the race, they are spoken of as purely black, not tawny. It is said that Scottish mothers soothe their children with the couplet. Hush now, dinna fret you, the black tinsler wanna get you. And in the song of Johnny Fay, the Countess thought, and now I must lie in an old tenant's barn, and the black crow glowering o'er me. Mr. Simpson states also that when gypsies quarrel, they begin to question each other's lineage, and one having more of the blood will taunt his acquaintance with some such expression as Giorgio like the white, to which the other returns, and what are you black trash? Will blood put money in your pocket? Blood indeed. I'm a better gypsy than you are, and everyone sees in your face. The farther back one looks, the more do the gypsies become visible as armed Miranders and not as mere vagrants, suggesting a time still further back when they formed a vast Tartar confederation. And quite recently, they have been used as auxiliary troops. In the 30-Year War, the Swedes had a body of them in the army, and the Danes had 3 companies of them at the siege of Hamburg in 1686. They were chiefly employed in flying parties to burn, plunder, or lay waste to the enemy's country. They formed, in fact, the black men of Halliwell and the Duke Shelley of the dictionary. And again, Francis von Perigny, who commanded at the siege of being short of men, was obliged to have recourse to the gypsies, of whom he collected 1,000. These he stationed behind the entrenchment, while he reserved his own men to garrison the citadel. The gypsies supported the attack with so much resolution and returned the fire of the enemy with such alacrity that the assailants, little suspecting who were the defendants, were compelled to retreat. But the gypsies, elated with victory, immediately crept out of their holes and cried after them, "Go and be hanged, you rascals." And thank God that we had no more powder and shot, or we would have played the devil with them. What? They declared. What they exclaimed, bearing in mind the proverb, "You can drive 50 gypsies before you with a wet rag." What? Are you the heroes? And so saying, the besiegers immediately wheeled about and, sword in hand, drove the black crew back to their work, entered them along with them, and in a few minutes totally routed them. Thus the outcry against the use of black troops in Europe, whether these are drawn from Algeria or from India, be raised on the ground that such a practice is an innovation in European warfare. Without going back so far as the black divisions of Scotland, one finds also in recent times a hint of certain stretches of territory belonging to the gypsies, or rather which had belonged to them at an earlier date. Wenzelberg noticed that in Hungary, the gangs assumed their names from the countries which they chiefly traversed, as the band of Upper Saxony, of Brandenburg, and so forth. They resented to extremity any attempt on the part of other gypsies to intrude on their province, and such interference often led to battles in which they shot each other with as little remorse as they would have done to dogs. In Romania, a large tract of Mount Haemus, which they inhabit, has acquired from them the name of Techiji Balkan, Gypsy Mountain. As for a similar reason, has the Black Mount district of Argyllshire acquired its name. And in Poland, Lithuania, as well as in Portland, there are an amazing number of gypsies. Now, although these statements only suggest a former ownership of the soil, this suggestion is confirmed in one instance at any rate. It must first be remembered that a common, if unpleasant, epithet applied to the black race is that of devil. The 15th century Gaelic poem previously quoted speaks of the pirate Alan McRory as the one demon of the gold, saying also, then, when came the black-skinned boar, many the devils in his train. The title of boar being presumably given to him on account of the boar-like shape of his headgear and armor. The fear of the two wrangling gypsies of Mr. Symonds depicts the description, taunts the other with the black devil in his face. And there are other and more notable cases of such devils to be more particularly looked at in another place. The name seems to have been chiefly applied to the Black Tartar tribe. About the time of Genghis, says Dr. Gustav Oberth, in a paper on the Kitai and Tarakitai. These tribes passed under the name of Tartars, and as they behaved like children of hell, they were considered to have come from Tartarus. Accordingly, there cannot be much doubt as to the meaning of the figures in one particular portion of the 15th century chart of planisphere described by Sir Walter Scott. The territory in which these figures are placed embraces Estonia, Lithuania, Portland, and such districts. The very distinct in which Grellman states that there is yet an amazing number of gypsies. This part of the map then exhibits rude cuts of the fur-clad natives paying homage at the shrines of demons who made themselves visibly present to them, while battle with the Teutonic Knights or other military associations formed for the conversion or expulsion of the heathen in these parts. Amidst the pagans armed with scimitars and dressed in caftans, the fiends are painted as assisting them, portrayed in all the modern horrors generally ascribed to devils. Now, this map was made in the very century that the band of 300 wanderers, black as Tartars, and calling themselves Sekani, arrived at Nuremberg, and the troop of fully 100 lean, black, hideous Egyptians reached Bolsonaro. Moreover, it was from this very neighborhood that 2 centuries earlier, innumerable multitudes of these barbarians, Tartars, headed by their Khan Bato, or Bata, after ravaging great parts of Poland and Silesia, broke suddenly into Russia, where they committed the greatest cruelty. Century map represents nothing else than this: a fur-clad and probably Ukrainian people inhabiting the southern and southeastern shores of the Baltic. This people thoroughly dominated in certain districts by a black Tartar race, and in other districts, most likely the western, the rulers and the ruled uniting to repel the forces of the white-skinned Christians of the West. To such Christians, Those Tartars were the children of hell. They were devils. And it is clearly from them that the amazing number of Lithuanian and Portland gypsies are descended. The gypsies then looked at as gypsies were fierce in nature and swarthy in skin, as far back as the conventional limit allows us to see them. Their warlike nature is most apparent in Simpson's book. The first sketch he gives of them is in the McClellan story of circa 1460, whereas Moors, or Saracens, they ravaged the southern districts of Scotland. And although he forgets this fact, strangely enough, stating that they greatly annoyed the country in the 15th century, his contradiction only bears upon the epoch which he places in the 3 following centuries after the 15th. So formidable were the numbers of the nomadic gypsies at one time, and so alarming their desperate and sanguinary battles in the upper parts of the Toledo and Cyclist Vale, that the offensive men in their neighborhood, countryside was the expression, had sometimes to turn out to quell and disperse them. A writer in Blackwood's magazine mentioned that the gypsies, late in the 17th century, broke into the House of Pinnacle when the greater part of the family were at church. Sir John Clerk, the proprietor, barricaded himself in his own apartment where he sustained a sort of siege, firing from the windows upon the robbers who fired upon him in return. One of them, while straying through the house in query of booty, happened to ascend the stairs of a very narrow thing. His foot caught hold of the rope of the alarm bell, the ringing of which startled the congregation assembled in the parish church. They instantly came to the rescue of the lord, and succeeded, it is said, in apprehending some of the gypsies who were executed. Intertribal battles such as that between the Faws and the Shaws at Romano in Tardale in the year 1677, and the Battle of the Bridge fought at Hawick a century later by the Kennedys and the Todds, reveals this people to us in the same red light. This fierce and warlike disposition of theirs, evinced in their constant attacks upon each other, as well as upon any peaceful whites who came in their way, gives them almost exactly the same appearance, in our eyes, as the half-subdued North American tribes of today, a resemblance which, in many other respects, is most striking. One sees this similarity again in reading such an anecdote, that of Utham's minister's adventure. Riding home one evening in the gloaming, he took a shortcut through a desolate tract, following a path that led by an old deserted cottage. Suddenly he discerned a grim visage staring at him from the cottage window, and also several dusky figures skulking among the balm tree bushes that had once sheltered the shepherd's garden. Next moment, there was a band of his on his bridle and a gruff voice demanding his money. Fortunately, the minister was able to recognize the voice and to discover in the uncertain light that it issued out of the great black burly head of his next-door neighbor, led its Will Fa, the gypsy chief. The recognition being mutual, he was allowed to pass unharmed as a friend of the tribe. The scenery and many of the accessories are different, but the incident suggests the reservation of a half-wild Indian tribe rather than any part of the British island at a period within the memory of now alive. Such adventures have gradually become less common until now they have ceased altogether. Gypsy banditti do not now ravage the country with fire and sword, or engage in savage and frequent clan fights, or carry off children of the whites, or waylay and murder travelers, or, as in more than one instance, strip an unfortunate countrywoman and leave her naked among the hills. These things have ceased with us, as they will have done across the ocean in the course of another generation or two. Mr. Simpson insists very strongly on the large amount of gypsy blood that is flowing in the veins of the ordinary population of Scotland, though intermarriages extending over, as he believes, the last 3 or 4 centuries. Some villages in the south of Scotland are, he says, almost entirely occupied by gypsies. James Hogg is reported to say, he adds, that Lachmubbin is stocked with them. And he introduces such examples as that of the falls of a branch of the celebrated Falkland to show how gypsies have become peaceful, industrious citizens and have mingled their blood with many families of high rank. In short, the people whom he styled gypsies, using that term comprehensively, correspond exactly with the melanotria of Professor Huxley. And this view of the matter explains very clearly all the black allusions which have been made heretofore. The black butcher of the Sabotdale story thus becomes nothing more than one of the peaceful members of the Yalfalm band, and all the other black men spoken of here and there are only gypsies prior to their intermixture with the whites. Further, this view of the question allows us also to advance the limit of black nomenclature almost up to the present day. Black male, for example, is an appropriate term not only when applied to the tribute exacted by the black Huns and the Danes, but also when it is employed in such an instance as that related to Henry Fox, chief of his clan in the latter part of last century, to whom men of considerable fortune paid a gratuity called black mail, in order to have their goods protected from thieves. Of course, this phrase has lost its original aptness before Henry Fox's time, as usually employed, but the ratio of its aptness must have increased more and more as it receded from his era. A black fisher, also defined by Dr. Jameson as one who fishes illegally by night, was eventually at one time so called because he was a black man or gypsy. The other explanations offered for this term are quite unsatisfactory. One says that black fishing is so called because it is performed in the nighttime, and another that it is because the fish are then black or foul. It'll be a name for the form of fishing pictured so graphically by Scott in Guy Manning, namely the spearing or listering of salmon by torchlight, and the presence on that particular occasion of a number of gypsies among the sportsmen is particularly appropriate, although it is probably they who introduced by the writer more from instinct than otherwise. The gypsies then, not to go further into detail, when accepted as numerous warlike and distinctly black people living an individual existence in various districts of the British Islands during the past few centuries, but gradually becoming mingled with the white races, announced themselves very clearly as the progenitors on one side of all the menotrio of our country. So far, this is very well. But M. Batalar will not accept the 5th and 11th century as the date of arrival of the gypsy race in Europe, nor is there any reason why he should do so. It is not necessary to follow out his own particular line of argument in order to see this. The existing gypsies of Lithuania and Portland are, it will be denied by few, quite evidently the descendants of those black pagans who, armed with scimitars and dressed in caftans, are depicted upon the 15th century map just spoken of. And these, it will be readily admitted, are, to some extent, the posterity of the 13th century Tartar of Genghis Khan, as indeed the Scandinavian appellation given to them indicates. But these are not the first Tartars that lived in Europe. It is true that in the 13th century, we see them regarded as intruders by the Christian chivalry of the West, to whom they were Saracens, Moors, devils, heathens, and pagans. And as such, warred against Prussia, they were almost totally exterminated. But whether the European Tartars of that period were wholly or only partially invaders, and whether their characteristics were Mongolian or only partially so, still they had been preceded by countless swarthy hordes. That kindred people are to be found in the Austrian Ishmaelites of the 12th century and their predecessors, the Ostindians of the 11th. There can be little doubt, as clearly where these akin to the black-skinned jugglers and minstrels of the medieval story, who at that time were living in England. Earlier still, in the 8th century, we see the same stock in the Huns, the Bulgarians, the pagans of Saxony, whom Charlemagne, after many fierce insurrections, overcame. Of such kindred were the heathen against whom he fought in Spain and southern France. Such were the Saracens that swarmed around his knights at Roncesvalles, and in the half-historic, half-romantic song that tells the battle, the lines, when Roland sees the cursed heathen folk as black as ink, all black except their teeth, reveal their lineaments to us again. The great Charles, grandsire, Charles Martel, had to encounter a like confederacy in the revolted Saxon pagans and the Saracens, whose conquering progress he checked before they reached the English Channel. Earlier yet, in the 5th century, 300,000 of their tawny corpses lay on the plain beside Chalon-sur-Marne, a portrait only of Attila's great host. And further back in time than this, whether as accidentally in the persons of Caesar's Numidian archers, or as Chuni, Sarmatian, and Tartan Argithorsi, dwelling in the vaguely defined regions of Scatia, those swarthy and kindred nations inhabited Europe. But it is not so much with the continental as with the British gypsies that we are concerned. These, it is said by one of their historians, regard themselves as a compound of many races. Dreadfully mixed is the expression they employ. Pharaoh's folk, Egyptians, and as often Ethiopians are the racial titles they apply to themselves in Scotland, and the resemblance even yet borne by them to these ancient peoples are many. That they were present in Scotland in great force during the 15th century is admitted by all. That they were there also at a far earlier period and in overwhelming number, I am endeavoring to show by the evidence both of history and tradition. The mountebanks and minstrels of John of Lamphame have declared to us their presence in England during the Middle Ages. By what historical name their ancestors were known cannot easily be determined, because there are so many to choose from. About the time when Charles the Great and his knighthood were struggling against such Saracens on the right hand and on the left, their northern branch is discernible under various names, sweeping out from the Sinbrick channels, swarming over the northern sea, and pouring their wild hordes into Christian Britain, ravaging and spoiling as they came. The fiercest division of these, and apparently the most recent in time, was that of the Danes, or Cimbri, remembered by the Christianized race of Britain as the Black Heathens, the Negre Gentes, the Dugau. But although such invaders as these may be claimed as, in some respects, the progenitors of the mingled people whom we now call gypsies, yet, like their continental kindred, the gypsies of Britain had far earlier British ancestors than these. Scotland was overrun in one district by Moors of the 15th century, but 5 centuries earlier, the kings of Alban were Moors, and one of the most celebrated of these, Tenant or Niger or Dou, ruled over certain districts known as the 3 Black Divisions. How long before and after that the ascendancy remained with his swarthy nation, and what were the probable fluctuations of color throughout the island, it is impossible to ascertain and premature to discuss. But at any rate, the Moorish race, next also Nomin Pictos, were among the chief opponents of the Romans when they marched through Britain 1,800 years ago. The traces left by these people in our folklore and our language have already been dealt well upon. They are remembered in many a tradition of days when Christendom was battling against heathenism. They were separate and distinct nations. They no longer exist. Wow. And that concludes chapter 10. A most amazing chapter.
Can you repeat that last? Can you repeat that last sentence again about fighting over Christendom? I just need you to repeat that again.
They were remembered. Okay, wait a minute. They were remembered in many a tradition of the days when Christendom was battling against heathenism. They were ultimately overcome, and as separate and distinct nations, they no longer exist.
Did you say heathenness?
Heathenness.
Christendom.
Yes, they spell that
heathen.
H-E-A-T-H-E-N-E-S-S-E.
Right. If I may, I just wanted to hear that because I just got to say this. We did the study on Christianity and how it was established and that it was for their earthly salvation. And the fact that they just said that is so powerful because they were not allowed to to establish their own religion. That's what the whole milestone of the Battle of the Edict of Milan in I think it was 311 or 312, where they got their milestone to, in fact, start their religion. And it's interesting because they were persecuting. When I say they, I'm talking about Moors were persecuting them for that. So this is what they're talking about. But, of course, they call the natural people heathens and also pagans. So when we do our etymology, we know that pagan truly means those who treat of the earth, like get resources from the earth, planting the earth. It's not what they portrayed it to be. So when they say the heathens, in this particular respect, they're talking the same thing. But more interesting than that is that they just told you that Christendom is something that they started. And so when the prophet says, give Christianity back, okay, that it was for their earthly salvation, that's just trying to assist to affirm that. But now the part in it where it says, and the two separate nations, it's in the end there, exist no more. Now I'm not sure what they mean by that, because as we know, when we come up in history, it's one nation, indivisible. We know we brought them into, the fold of government, here in these days. But I'm not sure what they mean, exist no more. Like, who, I'm not exactly sure the context of what they mean that in that particular sentence. Islam. Are you talking? Because if you are, you're on mute and no one hears you.
Yeah. So right. I said, let's open up the lines.
Yes.
Whoever would like to participate in this discussion, maybe somebody has an answer to that question, that query. So,
yes,
if you would like to participate in the discussion regarding what was just read, press 1 on your telephone dial, and what we'll do is we'll unmute everyone who would like to participate in the discussion, and then we'll just, whoever wants to chime in, we'll start that discussion. So we have caller 808-223. Is there anyone else? If you'd like to participate in the discussion, we got 26779. You're unmuted. Anyone else? All right. So what we're going to do, we'll just begin, and if anyone else would like to join in, just press 1 on your telephone. I'll unmute you, but I'll ask if you have some background noise, you mute your phone, and when you want to talk, you unmute it. All right? So who would like to begin the conversation or continue the conversation that was just started?
Islam. My name is RVBey, and I was in the discussion. I started off, I probably missed a little bit of what you all were saying. This is my first time tuning in. I was on transit, so I kind of was in and out. But I heard you reading from the book Ancient and Modern Britain, correct?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So I just put that down as one of my to get books. But just really, I kind of am just so excited, and I'm trying to be calm. I really just wanted to call and just talk to y'all and let y'all know I'm listening and a part of the conversation. And I just really wanted to share, and I don't want to take away from the actual discussion, but I just really wanted to, share, talk to y'all and just touch y'all because, we just literally, me and my whole house is just getting started on this, and it's catching wildfire, and I'm just so excited, and like, we just sent our paperwork, right, like to y'all for our proclamations and our ID cards and stuff like that. We messed up a little bit, but so we had to send it back. But, like, we just so excited. Like, we reading, like, we having a family reunion. Like, I'm telling my whole family, my grandma, that's 75, and, like, they just all receptive to the information because it's true. And I just want to just like, I gave them all the, like, information, like, listen to the link, call in, all the stuff I'm telling y'all. Y'all can look on the website and learn for yourself to listen. I just want to just say thank y'all, you know what I mean, for doing what y'all doing, for being touchable, and having these conversations on a regular.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that.
Absolutely. Stay in touch.
All righty. So we have, I think, caller 808-223. Did you want to
Islam family.
add Islam?
Islam, how are we doing this evening? How's the family?
Great. We're
Just
doing
fine.
fantastic.
Awesome. This brother RVBey. And fantastic reading. Chapter 9. Oof. just woof. We got there. Especially with chapter 10 wrapping it up. I'm glad that we were able to cover that tonight as well. But chapter 9, I don't know if the listening audience walked away with, again, McRitchie setting the scene of present-day Lertman of his time, you know, by quoting Skene, Huxley, Lehner, Sykes, in regards to what the his situation was at that time, or what he was up against, because this is what was being pushed out. But I think he made it pretty clear, starting with like page 151 with the Moor, the Black Warrior, and going into the Battle of the Bloody Bay. The Battle of Bloody Bay, it's a little interesting if you just do a quick Google search on it. There's a Wikipedia page on it in regards to that Scottish Gaelic native battle. And we know from earlier chapters when we see family appellations of Mac or even Donald, Douglas, Donald, Angus, we know who they're talking about, even though the Wikipedia page won't have potentially any artwork showing the clans conveniently. You now know from the reading who's who, what's what, and who was actually involved, and why you don't see any representations. Even going into 152, when he goes into a footnote about Thua Friga, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Thua, Tuath, Frigda, Figda. You'll find a lot of chronicles of the Picts or Scottish annals, history books, through Google, on Google Books itself. But I found it interesting that in the footnote, so I can jump back to it. Of course, the PC wants to get slow. That was
as you saw, I winged through. I winged through the translation or the pronunciation.
You nailed them. Nailed them. It was close enough to actually carry through to let the reader know.
You know, it's interesting because years ago, I called myself studying Gaelic because, you know, I studied about the Scottish and the Irish people and their languages was Gaelic. And so, you know, years ago, I called myself studying that language. So I guess a little bit of it came in handy with pronouncing some of these words.
I think you did well. Because it took me a while to try to even find anything that had a pronunciation of it on the interwebs to come even close. I mean, even Rory, I was like, that just took me for a loop when I first came across it. But on page 152 at the end, when he's when McRitchie specifically discussing the Rory, the Rudri, or Roderick, and many rendered the Tawny chief being a compound of Ruda, German Roth, Old Gaelic Roban, English Red, and Ruddy, and the Rick, Rai, and Ria, or Kinglet the chief. I try to find R-I, or Rick in etymology dictionaries. And then I turned to online, and of course, came across something on etymonline.com, but it came back as rich, R-I-C-H, the adjective, which, if I could read that quickly, an Old English rice, strong, powerful, great, mighty, of high rank, and later Old English wealthy, from Proto-Germanic Rikkijas, source of Old Norse Ricker, Swedish Rick, Danish Rig, Old Frisian Reich, wealthy, mighty, Dutch Rick, Old High German Rehai, ruler, powerful, rich, German Reichoth, Reichs, or Reichs, ruler, powerful, rich, borrowed from Celtic source akin to Gaelish, Ricks, Old Irish, Re, genitive rig, king. And then it goes into, of course, the Proto-Indo-European root of rag and rex. It says here that the form of the word was influenced in Middle English by Old French richie, wealth, magnificent, sumptuous, which is with Spanish rico, Italian rico, and Frankish ricci, powerful, or some other cognitive Germanic or Germanic source. Old English has had a noun, rice, rule, reign, power, might, authority, empire. The evolution of the word reflects a connection between wealth and power in the ancient world of foods and colors from as early as 14th century, of sounds from the 1590s, sense of entertaining and amusing is recorded in this later 1760s, and the noun meaning wealthy was in Old English. I just find it funny that re, with the definition being spelled out and etymology spelled out in ancient and modern Britons, leads back, and the closest you could come to it is finding the word rich. I just thought that just amused me when I came across it. Yes.
You know what else it sounds like? The way it was spelled and pronounced, Reich, R-E-I-C-H-T. And you know how they'll say, like the German right or
right.
Yes. Spelled, yes, it's like a ranking.
That's
it's
actually
like a ranking.
Exactly. That's actually in the etymology of rich. German right.
Exactly.
R-E-I-C-H. Meaning rich.
Right.
But yeah.
So that's their way of saying nobility.
Right. But it's not just a nobility in the sense of, just in case those may not, who may listen later on, it's not just in the sense of monetary resource or whatever that resource may be. That resource is really saying that the true resource that they talk about is the power of people. And McRitchie covers that, which is saying that you're rich in people or rich of this type of people. So you have many of those people with you. You're the king of that, whichever, whether it be Hamatic, whether it be whoever it may be at that time. He covers that pretty well in chapter 9. He's just saying that you have a trailer load. I mean, you have an army with you. So, yeah, whatever you say, you're probably going to get across because numbers don't lie.
Wow, interesting.
And also with that, Tua Friga. Yes.
You know, I also noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, he basically said that the people they call gypsies are Moors.
Yes.
And they
gypsies
use the gypsies.
It's a mispronunciation of Egyptians. Yes.
Yeah.
That was a European mispronunciation of Egyptian. But yeah. Mm-hmm. He even called it out in chapter 10. He says that they called themselves Tartars or Pharaoh's folk.
Yes, I saw that. Egyptians, and I think
pharaohs?
he also referenced
exactly.
He also but what I was noticing is you had these people who recruited the gypsies, which is the Moors, to help them fight and win battles. They do the same thing today.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like they must have looked back into the archives and realized that, look, if we want to win these battles that we fight in, we got to recruit the Moors.
Exactly.
Always.
That's the only way they ever won.
What I find funny is that McRitchie tried putting that in his book, in Volume 1, as this is a new fangled tactic that would be going down in the annals of time. But at the same time, then in chapter 10, why is he talking about when Rome and the Caesar came and invaded Britain, that there was two separate divisions that countered the Caesar. One of pure white and one black. And he's using it as an adjective, not a noun, as a descriptor.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly says it. If you Google when did the Romans invade Britain, and which is not by no means a scholarly research by any means or any connotation, but he comes back with 55 BC, in August 55 BC, the Roman general Emperor Julius Caesar invaded Britain, and he took within 2 Roman legions after winning several battles against the Celtic tribes in Britons, in parentheses, in southeast England. He returned to France. So even though they're not giving the full accolade in that brief synopsis out of a quick Google search, it's still showing you that there's credence to what McRitchie was stating at that time. He gives a better account of it, saying the divisions that fought against the Romans and what they looked like. And the fact that there were Rickies, plural, because Rickies wasn't a Rick or Re wasn't just one single king the way we think of today in the form of a king or emperor or sultan. He's saying that they were chieftains. They were heads, or for a bad analogy, capos, that had their peoples, but they all came together united in a common cause, which was this issue at hand. Exactly.
Yeah.
Sound
as
familiar?
A confederacy. Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
That was exactly my point. So the picture that McRitchie painted is far more in detail and finer stroke than the glancing one paragraph you get back on Roman Britain information from Wikipedia. Another thing that I saw was in the Thua Frigga, there is a book by a Robert Craig McCallan, published in 1905, titled The Perth Incident of 1396 from a Folklore Point of View. And what I'm seeing or have been coming across lately is that when I find historical events like great battles that have included the Moors fighting either with or against what we call modern day Europeans, the time range seems to be just both prior to the 1460, 1450 time period AD. And that history we don't see anyone talk about in the common day textbooks. It's things that we have to strive to discover within our own resources, or by our own means, I should say. And I noticed my favorite character of the time with my favorite area of the region, Edinburgh, is once again noted and spoke of. On page 159, he finishes up with citing a specific book titled, Notes to the Heart of Midlothian by, you guessed it, Walter Scott. You know, the gentleman, and I use that term loosely, that wrote, who's famous for the quote of, what a web we weave when first we practice to deceive. And I think he touches upon Scott's work again in chapter 10 as well. The book itself is, it is what it is. I think it was like his second or third book that he came out with. I think the book that really launched him was Rob Roy or something like that. But the book itself is dealing with a prison in Edinburgh called Old Tolbooth. I kid you not. The prison is called Old Tolbooth. And at the time, the Scottish country in Midtjylland, there was a riot, and the riot was called Petroius or Porterus, Porteous riots. And basically, that's a captain in the city guard, John Pretorius, and basically he ordered his soldiers to fire into a crowd and killed several people. And the crowd came back later and basically broke into the prison, or snatched up Porteous and lynched him. So that was the story that he was basically referring to at the finishing up chapter 9. And in the sense of he glanced over what the actual events were, but he kind of dropped a grain or a breadcrumb trail to it by just putting the title of the book in it, and finishing up the chapter that way. And the only other thing I got from chapter 9 was, did anyone else see all the references of black dwarfs? And did anyone have that little voice screaming TWA, twas, at any time? Black serpent-crested people.
Notice,
mm-hmm.
I did notice that he mentioned the dwarfs quite frequently, but I didn't connect it to that particular group of people.
I think he called it. I'm trying to find. I think I highlighted it here. Working off 2 devices to keep up with you. To keep up with you, mother. Just to let you know. Sorry.
It's hard to do some highlighting as you're reading, so I hope people are doing some highlighting while they're listening, because it's easier.
The Yinglings on page 156, he's going in on the Doors and the Laxadea saga with the Inglings, the marsh dwarves. For though Albach is one of the Gaelic words for dwarf, it radically means a waterman. It's a waterman, or a radical, in this case, a dwarf. So the second I came across that, the first thing that popped in my head were the Twa. Specifically, since we're dealing with the area where the Twas are from, Scotland, Ireland, Britain area. Because if they're in Ireland, I don't see that far-fetched of being in that region and traversing more land if need be, if the situation arises. I don't see that as being a far-fetched assumption, but I could be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then on chapter 10, I mean, Richie kind of blew me away with what he was covering the first time I read this, because But they kept popping in my mind as I was reading through it was all the, and I know this isn't historical, this is personal perspective, but all the fairy tale stories you've ever heard of, the shining white knight fighting the black knight, that just changed. Reading this just changed the whole perspective of having that those thoughts as a young person coming up, and then covering as well. I think the part that blew me out the water was him tying back to Genghis Khan, Attila the Hun.
Yes.
And was like, wait a minute, we're talking about ancient and modern Britons. Hold up, where are we going with this? Where's this coming from?
I know.
And that was my first breadcrumb into the trail of the whole Asia Nor, Asia Sul, and the entire planet being called Asia. That's how I actually was introduced to it, to the concept, to that truth. And also his mention of William Farr, or Will Farr, excuse me. He that's another one of those breadcrumb trails that Nick Ritchie drops in here that is real easy to glance over, thinking that he just threw a line in on what is the guy's name he threw in? Gilded Naked Will, known as Will Farr, and the town, Get Home. Right. Well, if you try to do a quick Google search on Will Farr, you'll get nothing but things on the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. But if you do a quick search in Google Books for Gilded Naked Will plus Will Farr, you may come across the memoirs of the late Reverend John Bard, minister of Yethome, Roxburghshire. It's a long title. And that was printed out in 1835. And basically it's the Reverend's accounting of his interactions with Will Farr. And Will Farr is actually per the memoirs of the late Reverend. Will Farr was the king of gypsies in the south of Scotland, whose family amounted to a number of 22 or 24. And he was the minister of a parish, seems generally to have been greatly respected by this lawless people. So you get an idea of what perspective or whose eyes you're looking through if you do happen to chance upon the memoirs of the late Reverend John Bard. But it does go into some details, and it lets you know that this just wasn't a bandito, so to speak, or what they call what Nick Ritchie will call a freebooter, or a marsher, or a marsh dweller, or a marsh troop in later chapters. But really, this was someone of high, noble status. And it was a good thing that the character that did bump into him, that they knew each other, because that's actually what saved him, as opposed to being victimized at that encounter.
Had good relations.
Yes.
You were mentioning something. You were mentioning something about how Wikipedia Nick Ritchie has a better accounting of one of the facts, and how Wikipedia does not. I was just thinking in my mind, you know how they say add to this, add to this on Wikipedia. You might want to be the one that add something. With your resources. Have you thought about that?
I've tried back,
okay,
but it's resource and time consuming, very resource time consuming, and can easily be redacted, retracted, or omitted. That's the reason why I did a few back in the day, saw them get blown away by others that had others perspectives. And at that point, I said it's better for me to just collect the facts for myself.
I got you. Yeah, because that's a lot. That's a lot to have to. I would assume, of course, you would have to show your sources and resources, and that's a lot to do for them to just arbitrarily say, no, we're not going to do that. I get you. I
think McRitchie showed. I think McRitchie shows it basically with chapter 9. I mean, if someone was to take that chance by saying, "Hey, look, this is who or what was going on when the Romans invaded Britain," but someone else decides to post Skene, Huxley, Lanier, or Sykes, or all 5 or more to disprove it, it becomes a third party pissing match, basically. Yeah. So I don't have. I won't spin my wheels on that. I'd rather put it out to people who are receptive and know who know. Hey, I know something of this, and what's what and who's who. More importantly, but
I got you. Okay. And that's why we need to make. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Oh no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and that's why we need to have our own, like what we're doing now. You know what I mean? And our own institutions of learning. Yeah, go ahead. You were saying about
if this is something
10?
you wanted to cover in RVBey publication, that's a different story, because I know that the effort that would go forth to cover the gathering that data would not be for naught. That's a different story. But in Wikipedia, I don't.
Yeah, I got you. Matter of fact, that might be something to consider, and I would put it under, notes from you. And where you found some of these things that really ought to be added, and I would not be adverse to doing that. So there you go.
There we go.
Let's talk about it.
The universe works in funny ways.
You know what? And divine law governs all events, and I think that would be a great thing. Because, I found it interesting that they even had Wikipedia and then said, if you want to put your opinion. So now you're sharing a little bit more. I mean, put your, not just opinion, but your resourced facts. You're sharing a little
add color
bit
to the story, sure.
Add color to the story, yeah, but it depends on, they might not want that color, So I think it's kind of interesting.
If it's not in the connotative notation, they may not want it. That's the problem.
Exactly.
And I only give connotative information. So
again, I think my invitation here might be a great one, especially under these auspices. We'll put it in the circle of readers. And we'll have your appellation, have done this research, you will find that, blah, blah, blah. They don't have it on Wikipedia, but here's some additions that are solid. Oh, I would love to. What do you think of that, Annie? That sounds, well, we'll talk about it later, but it sounds like a nice addition to, the efforts here. Islam. All right.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
I love it.
Because you know what? Because here's the thing, we don't have scholars of research anymore. Ivan Ben Sertimer, he passed form. Shinkan Dajak has passed form. His partner, Dr. Ben Yakanan, has passed form. Like all these great researchers who went and researched and found the truth about the Moors and brought it forth, they're all past form. Now you got a lot of young guys. They don't have the same integrity, and they're basically doing things just because they want tenure at a college.
What about the ones that go back? That only go back to Egypt, not knowing that Egypt is another word, or Egypt.
Exactly.
Right. How about that?
Exactly.
You say Egypt is another word for what?
Ancient Black culture.
Gypsy.
That drives me nuts.
The sister asked the question. She was asking. She said Egypt is for what? Well, gypsy. If you have the word Egypt, you have gypsies, and that is Moors, as is discussed in this book. If anybody wants to expand upon that for the sister that just asked.
Thank you.
You are so welcome. And what we're saying is that a lot of the brothers will go back to Egypt, and stop there, but still will call it Black Egypt. You know what I mean? So that's about as far as they go, and they don't even realize that that's really kind of considered modern, really. And they don't. Yes, it is. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I just want to comment on your statement about scholarship and research. I was I'm like interested in doing it. I did go to college for a little bit. I actually stopped going because like just with being indoctrinated. Because I was in school and I remember learning about 1492. My teacher kept talking to me about 1492, and then when I started learning about this information, it's like they teach you it, but then they be missing parts of like the story. So, I'm interested in researching, and the internet can really only take you but so far. And I actually went to the library for the first time, started looking at the dictionaries and the books. But it would be insightful to have a teacher, to tell you like, okay, this is how you research, or I don't know, just some help, because like what I do is I just read and I just write everything I read, and like I read the Constitution, the treaties, and I just be trying to like put it in my mind and just not forget it, just keep writing it and reading it over and over. But then I'm like, okay, now that I understand, okay, who I am right now, like I just got the basics, and I don't really know about going all the way back, to like ADs and before ADs, and how to tell if that information is a good information.
Right. Well, I can tell you a lot of these institutions, they always start at 1492 because it's around that time frame that they added 580 years to the calendar.
Yes.
So when they start talking about Christopher Columbus, they factor into 1492 when, if you subtract 580 years from 1492, they were nowhere in sight.
Exactly.
They were nowhere in sight. I mean, they were living in caves, living like animals. So they wasn't sitting at the table. So now what you have to do is when you start going, 1492 is a good place to start and go back, not forward. Most people, they go to 1492 and come forward to today. No. Because that information has been misconstrued.
Right.
You have to 1492 and go back. Telling you, 1492. Even if you take, like, for example, the Constitution. Constitution was written in 1789 and it was ratified in 1791. But if you take 1789 and go back, they don't tell you about. They tell you about the Constitution, but they don't tell you about the Treaty of Peace and Friendship, which is 1786. There would be no Constitution of 1789 if there was no Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1786. There would be no Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1786 if there was not what they tell you about the Declaration of Independence of 1776. But there wouldn't have been a 1776 Declaration of Independence if there was not, prior to that, the Articles of Association.
And speaking, I was reading
Articles of Association. And so when you go back, and then let me tell you, the Articles of Association began in 1774, but before the Articles of Association, you got to go back to the first chartered company of this land, which is one of them is the Virginia Company. They got their charter, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 1609. Where'd they get their charter from? Great Britain. So now you got to go back, right? Now, how did they get a charter to even come over here? Because for people to come over and engage in commerce, they have to have a treaty with the power of that land. You got to go back. See, the charter that was issued that established the Virginia Company, that came from Charles II. But the treaty to come over to this land came from Elizabeth, who predates Charles. And she sent a scout over here for the first time by the name of Walter Raleigh, and his charter is dated 1574 or 1584, I want to say. So then period, around that time period, and you ask the question, well, how did them people get over here? Because it sure as hell wasn't the nobles coming over here and setting up no company. Who set up the company? That's when you find out it was slaves of Great Britain that was sent over here either as prison, because the word governor, people run around here talking about they are governor. The word governor means a prison warden.
Warden.
All right. Those people were sent over here.
Whoa.
Somebody.
Hello?
Somebody's playing music.
What music is that?
That's not mine.
That's an encore for what you just said, and even where's it coming from?
See if I can figure out who that is.
They are trying hard.
Okay.
But I'm listening though. You said after 1574 or 84, that's when Elizabeth gives the charter for Walter Raleigh. Now who's before that?
She's got it. Give her a second. Somebody's got to act out that music.
Who is playing?
It's nice like, you know what? It sounds like somebody's probably on their computer looking for something.
There it goes. You got it.
There we go.
All right. Now, back to your question, sister.
All right. It's probably somebody's on their computer looking for something, not realizing that they're muted. They're unmuted.
It's still there. Some other music. Wow, this is weird. Like you said, brother, there might be something else going on, huh?
They're trying hard.
Trying hard. We are going. What is that?
I'm still here. I'm on my phone, so it's not me. I'm literally on the phone.
Okay. Well, she's probably already muted you to see that it's not you. And it's certainly not I. It's gone now.
All right.
Oh, wait a minute. Is she gone? There you go.
I'm here.
All right.
Go ahead.
All right. Well, I didn't figure out who it was, but anyway, so if you go into Elizabeth, in that time frame, which is the 1500s, they were sending over their Slavic, which is the English word for Slavic is slave. That's why when our people call themselves slaves, we say you're not the slave, nor can you ever be slaves unless you are Slavic. And the Slavic people are not Asiatic. The Slavic people are the pale, they are the true black people. They have no complexion. They have no color.
What is that background noise?
I don't know. Okay, if you're not talking, you just mute your phone.
Yeah, if it's me, let me know. I'm putting myself on mute now.
Okay,
all right, but I knew it was
her.
I knew
it's
it
her
was
background noise. You knew it what?
Oh, all right. Anyway,
no, it was her.
Elizabeth, it was because of the work that Elizabeth did, and Elizabeth actually, a lot of people don't know this, but Elizabeth, the treaty that Elizabeth entered into was with Sultan Murad of, I believe it was the Ottoman Empire at that time. It was called the Ottoman Empire. but that's the Moors. So, and we know that because in this ancient and modern, right? In ancient and modern Britain, they're telling you. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mom. I was going to say, just to camel back on that note, I believe Netflix just released a movie between of Queen Elizabeth and that Sultan. There was some type of intimate relations there.
Probably.
Really?
I'm not saying that type of intimate relationship, but they were friends. I don't know if it was more than that. I didn't watch the movie per se, but I know that they just released that recently, like about a month ago.
Really? You know, I to be honest, I love Elizabeth. Let me tell you, I think one of the best movies, that movie Elizabeth, and then they followed it up with The Golden Years, I think it was called. And much of what was like that Elizabeth, they tell you, they show you in that movie Elizabeth, and they depict her with red hair, right? Because the theory is if you're modern European and you have red hair, you supposedly got Asiatic blood in you somewhere, and that's why your hair is red. That's the theory. So, of course, to support theory, Elizabeth has red hair. And in that movie, Elizabeth, they show you her, her teacher was a Moor. His name was, oh my gosh, Walsingham? Was it Walsingham? He was loyal to her to his death. He had a wife and children, but he was at Elizabeth's beck and call 24/7. And it's because of him that Elizabeth was not, the assassination attempts, because there were many, were never successful. And her close cousins all conspired to murder her, sat at her table, was sitting at her right hand in court, put the crown on her head, conspired to murder her because she's not of noble blood. And people think that she's called a virgin queen because she maintained her virginity. It ain't got jack crap to do with her virginity. No noble family would marry their firstborn son to her because she's not noble, and they will not turn over their kingdom to a commoner. That's why she was called the Virgin Queen, because supposedly she never married, so she didn't have a husband, so, she didn't have, intercourse. She was having intercourse. She just was never caught.
Right. But it wasn't, the Virgin Queen wasn't real. They just said that, but it was really because nobody wanted to marry her because she wasn't.
Nobody would marry her. They tried to.
Right.
They tried to set up a marriage because marriages in noble families, those things are solidified from infancy. From infancy, they tried to broker a match between her and the King of France, and the King of France was like,
I don't think so.
You can't have my first. You have my third son.
No much.
You can't have my first. And to suggest the third son is an absolute insult. Like what you trying to say. You know what I'm trying to say. I ain't trying to say it. I said it. But England Great Britain would never mess with France because France is too powerful. And France is allied with, Spain and Rome and Russia. They will never mess with France. unlike the United States, who's dumb as a doorknob, messing with France. Like, what are you doing? Y'all ain't even friends with people like that. Don't be messing with France.
Right.
But the history, sister, once you start investing, I know a lot about the history because I've been reading about this history since I was a little girl. For real. Like, you know, when I was growing up.
That's a blessing.
Look, when I was young, we didn't have TV with 50,000 channels. Okay? We had TV with 3 channels, and they all went off at midnight.
Now,
whether you was ready to sleep or not, there was no more TV after midnight because all the channels signed off. There's no commercials, nothing. We had to entertain ourselves somehow because we wasn't ready to go to sleep in the summertime at 12 o'clock. So we read. We read books. We read anything we can get our hands on. But, you know, children don't do that. You know, they got way too many distractions. You know, when you're absolutely bored and there's nothing else to do but read a book, there's something in that. There's something in that. We need to bring that back.
Indeed.
Islam. I would just like to ask.
We can watch stuff.
What was
Say that again?
Two people talking. It sounded like there was 2 people talking.
Go ahead, brother.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I just mentioned if we watch the TV, let it be something that we can learn from at least. You know, I believe the brother said that it was a show. It was something on Netflix with the Queen, and I think I might have saw that, but I haven't paid attention to it yet. But I did notice that now that I'm a little bit thirsty for a little bit of the heritage, dealing with the Moors and dealing with when I do come across Netflix or something like that, I take it to the foreign titles, and a lot of them are really interesting. And I've kind of saw one that I'm in right now. It's called something Integral. I forgot the title of it. It's called Integral.
Resurrection,
Integral.
Resurrection Integral. Oh my God!
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm watching that slowly because I'm in the midst of me watching it. I'm learning the language. So I want to learn the language.
Same here.
And
it was so coincidental that I ran into that movie all around the time that I started studying the history of Islam. I pulled out my Arabic book, and I also, before I started watching that, Netflix has a series on Marco Polo. You think they're talking about Marco Polo, but they actually talking about Genghis Khan. So I learned about Genghis Khan.
Exactly.
So all it is,
Exactly.
and I'm, you know, and then we start, and what is the chances of all of this happening? And then we start reading ancient and modern Britons, and some of the things and peoples and names and places he's referencing in Ertugrul, Resurrection Ertugrul, that also in the history of Islam, that was also in Marco Polo, is in ancient and modern Britain. It's like this is like so much synchronicity going on.
Exactly. That's kind of crazy. Yeah, exactly how I feel the same way. And I'm learning, and everything bounces off each other. Like, well, okay, and even it bounced back to the other show, to the Magnificent Century, because when I watched the Magnificent Century, that's what gave me the energy, the mindset to watch the Resurrection Integral, because the same cut, they're talking, and they combine because they talk about some of the same things. They talk about the bays, They talk about the corruption, the betrayal in the family. They talk about that all, and right in there, and then I was like, whoa! So I went back and started learning a few words. But then when I was getting ready to go to that one, I didn't even watch it yet, but I started seeing something called Rain, and it looks like she's a quote unquote, would you say, Middle Eastern woman, but I know that she's an Asiatic sister. She's supposed to be Asiatic, and she's a queen. She's a young queen, and she has a certain bit of responsibility. So I'm not there yet, but I'm looking like, okay, she's a young queen that has certain set of responsibilities, and I'm thinking like, okay, in Code they're talking about an Asiatic sister because in the patriarch world they don't care nothing about their women. So, you know what I mean, they don't care nothing. Their women don't have any nobility or any prestige, you know, in the Englishman mindset. So this has to be Asiatic because it has to be Moorish because of the respect and the respect for the woman. And so that's just, to me, when I look at things, when I read history or when I look at things, how they treat the woman, how they treat their woman, and how they how their whatever their government or whatever acts, how do they act towards their women? And if you see that they treat their women as they should, as she's the mother, she's the queen of whatever, then I think that's leaning towards has a Moorish influence. It has and I learn, I study, I take heed to that. But yeah, and about you were reading the book, great to know that put confirmation on things like I heard of Gypsy. I heard of Gypsy before, and I even did some research in Egypt was. I'm not sure. I could be wrong. That when it goes to the origins of Egypt, I heard it's pronounced Ikupta.
Yes.
And that's something that I learned, and I was amazed. And I've heard the Gypsy was just I learned it wasn't at first a negative term, but it was just because it just describing the Asiatic people. Describing the Asiatic people, and every time I would watch something dealing with the Egypt, they say Egyptians or something like that, they would look like us. When I mean look like us, I mean they would have the American phenotypes, they would look just like brothers and sisters, in like as far as in our mannerisms, not like a kind of custom that with what you would see now. You know, and they will always the women will be always dressed in garbs. This is how the sisters dress now. How they got their personal style now. You know, and the brothers will know themselves. They were just Egyptians. So I think that might be synonymous to Moors. You know, and I feel that it is synonymous to Moors, and it's just maybe a different region, a different place. You know, so it's great. It's wonderful to learn more and more, and it's also great to know that these outer Europeans know what it is. They know our history. They know our heritage. They know it, and they will put it in literature to make their own self coin. While we out here, while some of our brothers and sisters out here believe in something totally different, and which is far from the truth.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes,
absolutely, yes.
On that, I wanted to just camel back on the conversation a little bit earlier. I think I had misspoken. The movie was Elizabeth, the Golden Age, that I was referring to that came out in 2017. But there was also another flick that got released.
It came out in 2017.
October 2017. I'm looking at it right now. Huh?
It must be another one because I watched. Not only did I watch that, I have it. I might have to look.
This one's
I have that DVD.
It's on Google Play with starring actress by the name of Kate Blanchett, Jeffrey Rush, Clive Owen.
She played in the original. Yeah.
And the director is Shekhar Kapoor.
Yep. He's supposedly Hindustani. Yep.
Right. But
Because,
the movie that came out that was Misremembering. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
It's another movie that's not dealing with Queen Elizabeth. It's actually Queen Victoria. The title's Victoria and Abdul. That was the movie. I had that mental picture because I was like, wait a minute. This all ties back to like Moors and Masonry and the treaties that Brother Abdullah had listed as sources in his book. That made me stop to go, hey, that's something I need to go back and watch to see just where they're at. Islam, how you?
Yeah. Islam.
All right. One last point for the young mother that was on the line. I'm not sure if she's still on the line, but she was asking about resources for research. I would share an insight that I've learned. There are, in the higher educational system, in the higher schools of learning, these universities usually partner up and have trusts set up. There's one in particular that I'll share that is available to anyone who has an internet connection. And that trust is named HATHI, HATHI Trust Digital Library. The website is hathitrust.org. Now this trust, what they do is they started in 2008. They went around to different universities, higher institutions of higher learning, went to their libraries of historical books, so anything that's outside of trademark, and digitally scanned each page of each book and then synced it into a database. So if you don't have the resource locally at your local facilities in your area, don't shy away from research online, but do not, I repeat, do not rely on search engine returns, because you won't get anything back. Even though we're getting some bad static on the line, I'm not sure if that's me or not. I'm not sure if you can hear me. There's the music.
There's the music. It's you. It's you.
They try so hard. They try really hard.
You said it. Something is definitely up. Somebody's doing their music lessons while monitoring the show.
I'm going to have to call Grand Chief Cujo and get him to say that line for us. They're trying hard. I can't do his voice, his accent. But the Happy Art Trust is one of the sites that I use. And what I like about it is that it's a full text index search engine of the material. So you could pull back books as far back as the Roman era. And it's not a it's a facsimile, it's a digital scan of the page of the physical book. So you'll see the cover, the blank page that's inserted, if there is any nomenclature or any publication information, or when that is, any handwriting, some scribble that someone may have done over the years. But it's a great resource because you have a digital copy. It's not the easiest to use in the sense of you found the book and you want to take a copy of it and keep it. That they don't do. But the book is there, so you could do your research, you could do screenshots, you could do prints, so that you can walk away with the material if you're really serious about diving into deeper research and want to be able to touch multiple institutes of higher learning without physically having to travel to each individual one. Islam.
Wow. Well, guess what? Was there somebody else?
Islam. Is there time?
Islam.
Is there time?
Well, it's 10 after. We got a little bit more time.
Islam. I wanted to. This is Anthony Shenkle with calling from the Caliphate territory of Morocco, and you mentioned Islam. Greetings. You mentioned Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth the First, and Murad, and I'm looking at page 8485 of Murad.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm looking at Moors and Masonry, Abdullah's book on page 83 and 84, and it says Elizabeth I of England and Murad III of the Ottoman Empire. It gives a link, but it says the formal beginning of Anglo-Ottoman relation dates from the correspondence between Elizabeth I and Murad III in 1579, which led in May 1580 to an Ottoman pledge of safe conduct. A bitmin for English merchants in Ottoman-controlled seas and ports in the eastern Mediterranean, the Levant, and along the Barbary coast of North Africa. I'll stop. The references, Abdullah's book on page 84 and 85. And then on another one it says Anglo-Ottoman relations. In the box it says, as a letter of Queen Elizabeth to Murad II shows the chief reason why captives were taken by the Turks. It was reprisal for English periodical attacks. Reprisal is the forced seizure of a foreign subject or their goods as an act of retaliation. And looks like Daniel Kaufman's The Ottoman Empire and Early Modern Europe. Kaufman is professor of history at the Ball State University. And his publications include Izmir and the Levantan World, 1550 to 1650, Britons and the Ottoman Empire. So, yeah,
that's correct. But the reason that Elizabeth entered into agreement with Murad was because none of the other Moorish families wanted to do anything commercially wise with her because she was of common stock. So they, for her entire life, they were trying to kill her. So that's why she had to enter into this secret sort of kind of negotiation with Murad. But prior to Elizabeth, there is rumors, well, not rumors, but there's a hint that John in 1200 entered into some negotiations with the Moors as well. But I haven't been able to find where I think he intended to, but the whole debauchery went down with him trying to turn on the Pope, and as a result, he ceded Great Britain and I think also America to the Pope or Spain or something like that, because there was a secession that he ended up doing because he was literally trying to be independent, so to speak. And so he had advised his barons to listen to what he was telling them to do, as opposed to honoring what the church had sent over for their people to put forth. And he thought that his barons would have his back, and that he would have this backing with the Moors, and it didn't happen. And he ended up ceding everything to it's either Spain or the Pope. I actually have the the ceasing document. But maybe what I'll do is I'll try and find it, and we can kind of review it because it all plays into all of this. So there was an attempt with John to enter into a relationship with the Moors, but I don't think he was successful. Because if he had been successful, things would have went differently. So there was that. Elizabeth was his first successful. Yeah.
Was that previous to the Magna Carta?
It was.
Post?
I want to say there was
several
Magna Carta. There was several Magna Carta. I think the first one was with John.
Right.
And so
I think that's like 1215 or something.
Yes. It was around the same time as the Magna Carta, because the reason he signed the Magna Carta was not that he had any intentions of adhering to it, but he figured if he signed the Magna Carta, the Baron would back him. But it didn't pan out that way.
Wasn't the Magna Carta like a setup?
That's why he was setting up the Barons, because he didn't have any intention of adhering to the Magna Carta. The only reason he signed it was so that the Barons would back him against Spain and the Pope. But it didn't play out that way. And he ended up ceding everything to he became he became the president in name only. You know what I mean? It was like that.
Well, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think the King John's Magna Carta in 1215 that actually got rescinded by some Pope Innocent. I don't know if it's like the Pope Innocent the second or the third, and then that led up to the.
I know it was.
Someone has
I know that it had been rescinded, but you know what? We actually got a copy of it. We actually got a copy of that Magna Carta, and we just haven't had a chance to really analyze it because, so much stuff to analyze and go through, and plus things that are happening on a daily basis. But we gotta, because that he was the first one to do the Magna Carta, but there was also one that was rewritten, and I believe it was Edward. And we got to figure out what Edward
Henry
they're
III.
talking about. There was a Henry II. There was one with Henry II. But it's not.
There was a Henry III that came
been
after in the 16th, in 1216. There was another one that came after that with Edward. I think it was Edward the First. I think that was about 1225 thereafter. But there was something else that came about in almost at the end of before the 1300s, like in 1290, the late 1290s.
Yep.
And that one's escaping. I don't know. I don't think it was in total. There were, I think, like 5 Magna Cartas or renditions of it, and I think it spanned like 3 different or 4 different kings. Now I'm not 100% certain. I'm working off memory here. Yeah, I'm working off memory here.
3.
But
I know it's at least 3. It could be 4, but I know it's definitely 3. You got John was the first, Henry, and Edward.
Right.
I know there's at least 3. Islam.
I'm looking at page 32 of Moors and Masonry, and it says in here, the European response to the Moorish captivity of Europeans, negotiating the ransom of the release of Europeans held in Moorish captivity. Many charitable associations were established during the 12th and 13th century to negotiate the ransom of impoverished European captives held in Moorish and Turkish captivity. Jean de Matha found the Order of the Holy Trinity and redemption of captives in 1199. Pope Innocent III approved the order in 1198. The order is known in France as Maturans or Donkey Brother. Danny Lee Poole and James Douglas, Gerald Kelly, and the Barbary Hussars give an account of the orders ransoming Europeans held in Moorish captivity. So I don't know if that ties into.
Well,
it does.
What
actually.
happened was the
Islam
People's Church.
Huh?
Go ahead. It was mostly
I was going to say
churches,
that in the
parishioners. They would get together and try to raise money to release the Christian slaves, because the British kings was not spending their money on freeing slaves unless they look really bad for not assisting, which didn't always happen. And whenever they sent over any kind of because the church raised the money didn't mean the king was going to send over anybody to represent the kingdom. The priest could sometimes go over there because they didn't injure the priest, but the priest would go in there sometimes on behalf of the church, and that was only if they allowed them in. They didn't injure them, but they might not let them in, and so that's how they found out what was going on. And they would even come back and report it to the king, and the king sometimes wouldn't do anything. So it didn't matter that they were able to raise some money. They could never raise what the Sultan would have been asking for. So, But typically, if the king did send somebody to negotiate, it wasn't the releasing of the slaves was like a sidebar. They wanted to make sure that their trade wasn't interfered. It didn't get interfered with. But we got like 6 minutes left, and I believe somebody was trying to say something. So I'm going to yield the floor for that, and then we will close out this amazing broadcast discussion.
Islam. I was on the camelback on what the brother was mentioning from, or citing from Brother Abdullah's book, Moors and Masonry. In ancient modern Britons, you'll see that in the chapters we just read, he touched upon an earlier chapter about blackmail, and in the chapter we just read this evening, I believe chapter 10, he discusses blackmail again, in which blackmail being the tribute being paid to the Huns. As well as, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. It's okay, I just heard muted come on my phone.
You know what? I hit the wrong button. Go ahead.
Oh. Okay.
You were saying the Huns.
I would say the Huns, that tying back to Moors and Masonry, Abdullah goes into blackmail, and its definition being that the modern-day Europeans paying annual tribute or tribute to the Moors to be able to get safe passage on the seas. Mm-hmm. And McRitchie covers that as well. In, I believe it's like page 134, he first brings up what blackmail is and the Black Huns and the Danes extracting that tribute out of the Romans to leave them unmolested as well as in the chapter that we read this seed in chapter 10, the second chapter we read, he covers blackmail for another time, covering how it was tribute extracted by the Huns and the Danes. Basically, my point here is just that you'll find when you start digging, they muddy up the water, so to speak, by using localized names for certain groups to try to make a distinguishing or to try to distinguish them as somehow being separate, because although they may not go back to the same Don or the same chieftain, still all part of the same nation. You may not be or empire. It still goes back to the planet as it would be ran. To them, from their perspective, and that would be the perspective that you're going to see or have been seeing from McRitchie's accounts, they seeing it from what's transpiring as an outsider, if that makes sense, as opposed to seeing we're collecting what's due because this is the way the system is set up that we have put in place. And if you don't want issue, then you submit to what it is that we're stating. If you do want issues, don't. See what happens. And that goes back into the churches that you may see today here on this landmass that'll have names like not resurrected. The word's escaping me right now. Starts with an R. But basically it means what's the word? It's in Abdullah's book towards the back in Moors of Masonry. You'll see it, not resurrection, redemption, soul redemptions, or Our Lady of Redemption, or any church and facility you see redemption in it. They're not speaking of redeeming souls. They're speaking of they'll say in their annals they were redeeming souls, which is translated to really meaning they were going out collecting pennies and pences from the peasantry of the families still left on land where they were at to take over via the quote-unquote priests that would go into the empire to try to seek a council with the Sultan to try to pay to reprieve or get the captives, the slaves, out of bondage. So that's really where the term redemption, and Abdullah does a wonderful job in Moors and Masonry in covering that detail. So when you today, I travel landmass a lot due to my employment, due to what I do. So I see it all over Ohio and St. Louis. You'll see old churches that are with the arches, and it'll be Our Lady of Redemption or Redeem something. even hospitals I've come across.
Well, Islam, the line is going to go down in a couple of seconds. So I just want to thank everybody once again. This was an amazing discussion, and we'll